No road, no railroad, and no horse could cross the deepest cypress swamps. So men climbed onto flat wooden barges, fired up boilers to over 100 pounds per square inch, and trusted inch-thick steel cables to drag steam-driven pull boats through quicksand that could swallow a man whole. This wasn't supposed to work. Sometimes it didn't. Why risk your life riding a 50-ton machine into territory where the ground turned liquid? The answer starts where the land gave way beneath their feet. Subscribe to see the stories of men who built America with nothing but steam, steel, and guts. The pullboat barge looked nothing like a ship meant to cross water. It stretched 30 to 50 feet long, built of thick planks nailed over a flat bottom, with no keel to cut through waves and no propeller to push it forward. Instead, the whole craft sat so low in the water that only a few inches of freeboard separated the deck from the swamp, a thin line between the crew and the black, tannin-stained muck below. Where a man might sink waist-deep just by stepping off, this barge floated, barely, its weight spread wide to keep from vanishing into the quicksand. Movement came from a heavy steel winch bolted to the deck, not from any engine turning a shaft. Ahead, a massive anchor was hauled out and set into whatever passed for solid ground. Then the winch would drag the entire vessel forward, pulling cable hand over hand, inch by inch, through territory that swallowed horses and derailed trains. The barge's shape was pure necessity. Every foot of length, every inch of clearance calculated so it could ride atop a world where the earth itself was liquid. Subscribe to see more stories about the men who built America with nothing but steam, steel, and guts. Steam was the heart of the pullboat. A vertical boiler fired with coal and swamp water built pressure up to 150 pounds per square inch, enough force to turn a double-acting engine that never stopped working. The fireman's world was a rhythm of shoveling coal, watching the sight glass, and listening for the hiss that meant danger. If the water dropped too low, the boiler could explode without warning. All that energy drove a steel drum 4 feet across, wound with more than 1,000 feet of cable, as thick as a man's wrist. Every revolution stored muscle that could drag a log weighing several tons straight through roots and mud. The fireman's sweat and vigilance kept the pressure steady, and the engine's gears turned raw steam into torque that made the whole barge tremble. Nothing about this power was gentle. Every pound of steam meant another yard clawed from the swamp's grip. The force waiting on that deck was measured in tons, not horsepower. The ground beneath the pullboat was neither land nor water, but something in between, a shifting, unpredictable world that defied every rule of solid earth. Some stretches hit a base of hard clay, firm enough to hold an anchor for a few precious feet, but that could change in a heartbeat. Just yards away, the bottom dissolved into bottomless muck, a soup of rotting leaves and silt that had swallowed whole trees and oxen before. Men who tried to walk it found themselves up to their waists, boots sucked off by the vacuum below, the mud clinging with the grip of wet cement. No two steps were the same. One foot landed on something solid, the next vanished into black nothing. The water itself was stained dark by tannins, hiding every treacherous dip and root. Even the barge, built to spread its weight, floated only because it never stopped moving. Every pull of the winch was a contest against a landscape that wanted to drag everything down. In this place, the only path forward was the one you carved yourself, inch by inch, across a floor that could turn to quicksand without warning. Fallers worked ahead of the pullboat, wading through water that could swallow a man whole, crosscut saws balanced on their shoulders. Each tree had stood for centuries before two men, knee-deep in muck, started the slow bite of steel teeth. Cypress did not fall clean. When it finally gave, the trunk crashed sideways, splashing half-submerged, a wall of water and bark. The log settled into the swamp, too heavy to float, its weight pulling it deeper with every minute. On deck, the crew sprang into motion. The hook tender took the lead, dragging a loop of cable as thick as his wrist through water that smelled of rot and iron. He waded forward, feeling for solid footing, wrapping the cable around the log's base. Chains snaked out from the barge, not just one, but two or three, each anchor set in a rare patch of hard clay or wrapped around a tree that still stood. Every anchor mattered. One slip, and the whole barge could swing sideways or vanish into the mud. The operator called out, steam vented, and the engine engaged. The drum began to turn, winding cable tighter and tighter. The line went slack, then snapped tight with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. The barge shuddered as the log moved, inch by inch, grinding through roots and silt. Water boiled around the cable, tension humming through the steel. Every man knew to keep clear. One glance at the vibrating line said everything. The whole process was a dance with disaster, each movement rehearsed but never safe. Steel cable under tension is a silent threat. On a pull boat, that cable could stretch 2, even 3 feet longer than its resting length, elastic as a drawn bow, while holding back the force of a freight train. Every strand was loaded with energy, the whole line humming and vibrating, waiting for the smallest weakness to give way. Friction from grit and rust ground at the wires day after day until a single pull was one too many. When a cable snapped, it didn't just break, it unleashed all that stored power in an instant. The recoil sent the line whipping back at speeds over 200 miles per hour, faster than a car on the highway, nearly as fast as a bullet. There was no warning, no time to move. The sound was a scream, not a bang, as the cable lashed through the air. Anything in its path, man, tool, timber, was cut down without mercy. The arc of death could reach 100 feet or more, slicing through flesh and bone as if they were nothing. Crews learned to keep their distance, but the swamp offered little room to hide. Each pull was a gamble. Worn ropes were run until failure because replacing them meant lost time and lost pay. The men watched the cable, felt its tension, and knew that one mistake could end a life in a heartbeat. Admiration for the machine faded, replaced by a sober respect for the violence it could unleash. Summer in the cypress swamps meant working through air so thick with heat and humidity it pressed against your lungs. Temperatures climbed past 90 degrees before noon, and the coal-fired boiler on deck pushed it even higher. Sweat never dried. Skin stayed slick, salt stinging every cut and scrape. Mosquitoes and deer flies swarmed in clouds, biting through shirts and leaving welts that festered and bled. Malaria was not a distant threat. It cycled through camps, bringing fever, chills, and days of weakness. Still, men hauled cable, swung axes, and shoveled coal until they could not stand. Meals were beans and salt pork, water boiled from the same swamp they worked in. Nights brought no relief. Blankets soaked through, sleep broken by the whine of insects and the ache of exhausted muscles. Some men collapsed from heat or vanished into the muck, their names remembered only in camp whispers. Survival here was measured one day at a time. Pull boat work paid more in a season than most men could hope to earn in years behind a plow. Company ledgers from Louisiana and Mississippi showed daily wages 2 or 3 times higher than farm labor, with bonuses for every 1,000 board feet hauled out of the muck. That money came at a price, no insurance, no safety net, and no guarantee you would see the season's end. Men signed on because they needed the cash, but also because dragging logs from the heart of the swamp was something few dared. The legacy of that risk is written in the landscape. By the 1940s, 90% of the South's virgin cypress was gone, logged out by crews who left only stumps and silent canals behind. Today, a handful of pull boat hulls rust in forgotten corners, and old cypress boards still hold up porches across the South. Subscribe, so these stories of real work and sacrifice don't disappear for good. Every cypress beam still holding up a pier or porch is proof that human risk built the comfort most of us now take for granted. The cost is buried in forgotten names and lost forests. What we build today still demands we ask, who pays the price for progress? Subscribe for more true stories.